All right, hello and welcome to the Grimm Times podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Jarman. It's good to be back. So I'm going to record this without actually editing the podcast whatsoever this time. I don't think I want to go through all that stuff just for me to talk to you this one time. I think today I'm going to do an episode on Skinwalkers. It's been a really long time since I've put out a podcast. I've got time set aside tomorrow to film. We are going to be filming Jeff Jarman show tomorrow and Saturday. I'm going to have, hopefully, my Uncle Joe onto the Jeff Jarman show for the very first time ever, so that would be his big debut. I've got a special character in mind for that as well. So, there's been a lot of things in the news right now. I'm not even sure how much I want to talk about, really. I've talked about it with people in person to the extent that I really want to go. The deal with Tony Stewart obviously is pretty heartbreaking for me, especially being a NASCAR fan and kind of empathizing with what he's going through, I guess. And then also with Robin Williams passing, just been a pretty sad time lately. But on the upside, we had our wedding last Saturday. I'm recording this on the 21st of August, 2014. So, and everything went really well. If you weren't there, sorry you missed it, but that's okay. I know other people have lives too. It did not rain on us, which was very nice. And everything went pretty well. I didn't mess up my lines because I had to read my own vows, so that was good. I didn't mess that up. Yeah, I mean, that's about it. That's all I was really worried about. So now let's just jump straight into this. Oh, also, I forgot. I'm working on a new software for recording podcasts. I'm going to start using more than one microphone, so that if I have somebody on here like Skylar, we don't all have to just crowd around my one microphone. We can each have our own and we'll be comfortable, and hopefully it'll make for better conversation and better audio quality, audio leveling, that kind of stuff. Anyway, so today I'm going to talk about Skinwalkers. Our religion series is kind of on hold at the moment. We're still working on research and figuring out exactly what we want to go over for the next one. We still have 3 more parts of that series, I believe, to do. So today, with the Skinwalkers, I've been studying this for just about 3 days here, most recently. But I've studied them in the past as well. It's just something that's really fascinating. For those of you who don't know, a Skinwalker is supposedly a Native American who can change into an animal or take on an animal-like quality. It's kind of like, almost think of a werewolf, basically, is what they are. And the story... Originally, from what I've researched, Skinwalkers originated sometime around when the Spanish were first coming up into the Americas, well, into North America anyway. They were coming up here to invade the land, and the Native Americans had to deal with them. And apparently what they would do is kind of this mercenary type character who was a Skinwalker. He would change into an animal and go and spy on the Spanish camps and figure out what their battle plan was for the next day. And that's how they kind of would survive that little skirmish, is they would know what the Spanish were gonna do ahead of time. So you can imagine how that would be very helpful. Over time, it seems like the Skinwalkers have turned evil. I don't know if it's due to certain people becoming involved in the activity, or if it's just what it was by nature from the very beginning. It seems to be mostly the Navajo who do this kind of stuff, and it happens mostly on Indian reservations themselves. Usually they don't occur with people who are outside the reservation, and the Skinwalkers themselves don't really mess with people who are outside the reservation. It does happen, however, and that's the majority of where a lot of our stories come from. I think it might be because the Indians are so, they keep all of their stuff really close to them and away from the public eye. I don't know if they want that kind of stuff exposed very much. But right now I'm actually looking at an article written by George Knapp along with Colm Kilthayer. I don't know. I probably horribly messed up that name. But anyway, and it's kind of an interesting article, and especially with it being from George Knapp. Some of you may know him from Coast to Coast AM, occasional host when George Norrie's not at the helm, which I wish George Knapp would do it full time, but that's another thing. Or Art Bell, really. But Art Bell needs his own show now, away from Coast to Coast, obviously. So anyway, oh, and also a lot of this happens around the Four Corners as well. the four, I think it's Colorado, Utah, or Arizona, and Oklahoma. I don't know. That might be wrong. I'm not sure. Anyway, yeah, so I might read actually portions of this article or actually kind of link back to it to clear up what I'm trying to say here. In the American Southwest, the Navajo, Hopi, Utes, and other tribes each have their own version of the Skinwalker story, but basically they boil down to the same thing: a malevolent witch capable of transforming itself into a wolf, coyote, bear, bird, or any other animal. The witch might wear the hide or skin of the animal identity it wants to assume, and when the transformation is complete, the human witch inherits the speed, strength, and cunning of the animal whose shape it is taken. And that's a little excerpt, obviously, I was reading. Something kind of interesting, I've heard that one of the thing that you have to do to become a skinwalker is, and a lot of people probably think this is just all crazy, and it doesn't actually happen, but you would be surprised, especially with a lot of these Native American stories, just how many are actually true. Okay, so with the ceremony to become a skinwalker, they actually have, it seems like from what I've read, an actual little cult. And sometimes they indoctrinate a new member every so often. Maybe they meet weekly, even, I've heard. But it's usually out in the middle of nowhere where nobody's going to find them or mess with them or anything like that. And usually they'll bring new people into it. And it's always for a dark reason, a dark purpose. And it kind of ties in with like curses and all that kind of stuff. Medicine men, aka witches. Things like that. But anyway, for the ceremony, what they have to do is like, it's involving something about dancing around a fire, maybe some skulls laying on the ground around the fire. I've heard that you have to kill a loved one or sacrifice a loved one to become a skinwalker to gain this power. And it has to be somebody really close to you, like a parent or a sibling or even a child. And so that shows you just how dark this kind of thing is. But they place the skulls around the fire, and sometimes they'll have animal hides laying in a certain area, if they're in a cave or wherever, just around the fire. And you will go stand behind one of them, and you will choose pretty much which one you want to be. The skin, there's different legends. One has the skin actually jumps up onto you, like it chooses you, and the other one has it to where you choose the skin and then you just put it on yourself, and then you begin to transform. And they even had it to where you could put the skin on, become that, and then kind of run out into the wilderness, find out if you like it or not, come back, and then if you like that one, stay with it or pick a different one. So I guess that kind of infers that you can only be one for your lifetime or something. I don't know. I mean, if you can choose at the very beginning, then obviously you probably should be able to switch every now and then. But anyway, there are lots of stories of people who have seen skinwalkers or think they have seen skinwalkers. One weird thing associated with the skinwalker is somehow they can mimic the voice of a loved one or somebody that you know or have heard before. I remember one story of a kid who was sitting out on his front porch with his brother, and his father, I think, was there as well. And he was sitting out on the front porch. His mother was gone at the time, and all of a sudden, and it's nighttime, and they hear his mother's voice. And it sounds like she's calling for the dog. She says the dog's name, then she whistles for him, and so one of the brothers goes in the house, and the other one's really confused. So he kind of gets up and he walks around. Then he actually goes around to the back side of the house, and he sees something run from the back of the house into the woods. And he said it was so fast that it wasn't like, it couldn't be a human going from a standstill to running that fast in that short of time. And so it was just really weird, and he got a really bad feeling from it. So he ran back inside, and he called his mother to see if she was at the house, and maybe that was her. Turns out she was still at the store buying groceries. So that's kind of crazy. I guess it left them alone after that. Sometimes they don't. There was one family who was driving back home in Arizona, and they had just moved. Actually, they were moving to Flagstaff, Arizona, and they had to drive on the outskirts or just through Indian reservation, and they were a little bit nervous about it. And they say that you really shouldn't go through one of these places at night. I guess it's dangerous or something, I don't know, but they had to do it anyway. And so they're driving through the desert completely alone. there's a dad, mom, the girl who's telling from her point of view. I think she was 17 at the time, I want to say, maybe 16. And her brother was riding in the back of the truck. And they were driving, and they were completely alone because it's in the middle of nowhere, and then storm clouds start coming up. And so they pull the boy back into the cab because they don't want him to get rained on. And they keep going, and then eventually they see the headlights in the rearview mirror, and they're way off in the distance. And it's kind of one of those deals where it's like you see them go down, and as you go over a hill, they disappear, and then they'll come back. Well, they saw this happen a couple times, and they were kind of surprised too to see anybody out there, but they were happy because if one of the cars has trouble, then there'll be that other car there to help them out, and vice versa. And they keep going for probably about half an hour, and then eventually they see those headlights dip down, and they never come back up. So they're thinking, okay, well, that's kind of weird. Maybe they stopped on the side of the road for some reason, but it's in the middle of nowhere. So I don't know, but they just keep going. And they actually have to slow down for a bend in the road. And the daughter is looking down at the map when all of a sudden she hears her father yell out, what is that? And he's super scared. And she has no idea. They had slowed down to about 55 because they were coming up to a curve on the road. And she looks up, and I guess she sees what her dad saw. And her mother is sitting there totally quiet, just paralyzed in fear, and I guess the same thing for the brother. She looks up and she sees something in the ditch on the side of the road, and she described it as kind of like a werewolf-looking figure. It actually had the head of a wolf, it looked like, but it was wearing human clothing. So it's very odd, and it was completely covered in hair, and it was as tall as them sitting in the truck while it was standing in the ditch. So it's pretty tall. That's got to be, I have no idea how big the ditch was, but you got to think at least 7 feet tall. And to be wearing clothes, that's pretty weird. But apparently it actually put its, what would be its hands up on top of the truck cab. And I can't remember if it was walking along with the truck at the time. I think it was, because they didn't stop for it, that's for sure. But yeah, and she thought that she heard it scrape or something as they drove away, and after that they didn't see it again. And it was 2 days later when they were at home. Her and her brother were home by themselves, and they were upstairs in her bedroom, and they were looking out the window, and all of a sudden they see four. Well, actually, I got to go back. They're in the bedroom and they hear drumming first off. And actually, that's kind of interesting because sometimes with ghosts, when you're near a Native American reservation, you'll hear those drums, and it's kind of like a ghostly drum. But anyway, back to the story. They hear these drums, and so they look out the window and they see four men standing along the fence line, and it's a barbed wire fence, your average height. And they're standing along the fence, and they act like they want to come across. And for some reason they can't, I guess. It looked like he was trying to get his leg up high enough to go through it, but he couldn't do it for some reason. And the drumming started to fade out, and they walked away. So it turns out the girl went and talked to a friend of hers who was a Navajo Indian. And she said that apparently her family had been targeted by Skinwalkers, and that for some reason the Skinwalkers couldn't get to them. She said it was because their family had a lot of energy or something, or they were powerful, and the Skinwalkers were envious of that for some reason. So, I don't fully understand it. I think a lot of people don't fully understand what's going on exactly, but yeah. And actually, I think I had left at one point out of the story that they had received a blessing right before they left from an Indian. I'm not sure. I want to say they were blessed, but anyway, after that experience, they were blessed again, and they had the whole house and property blessed by the witch doctor or medicine man, whatever you want to call them. So I'm not really sure. It's really a strange phenomena. There are tons more stories I could go through, but I think some people confuse them with demons as well, because sometimes they claim that there's a witch who lives up in this mountain pass, and it has like horns or something and almost red skin. So it's really weird, but it's been up. The legend of that thing has been up there for hundreds of years. So I don't think it's one individual person. That could be a demon. I mean, I don't really know, but obviously it could be demonic if they are using this kind of ability and making sacrifices and things like that. Things that are like otherworldly, you know. And for some reason, Sasquatch is also not totally exempt from these stories. I mean, everybody, well, not everybody, but most people know that Native Americans have legends of Bigfoot. They have legends of giant hairy men carrying off their women and children and sometimes taking their food, different things like that. And some people, I think they get confused when they see a Sasquatch. They might think that it's a werewolf or AKA a skinwalker or vice versa. So it's pretty interesting. But yeah, and skinwalkers, they seem to target people based on jealousy. And it seems petty, but I guess that's just how they are. I mean, evil has no, morals, I guess. Say, for example, that you bought a new truck and you put it out on your front lawn, and people see it, and your neighbor happens to be a skinwalker and say that he sees this truck and he wants that and he's envious of you and he's jealous. So he could put a curse on you or something, and then eventually you won't be able to make the payments on that truck anymore and it'll get repossessed. Maybe he'll buy it for that discounted price of the repo vehicle, and then he'll have the truck. I mean, it's stuff like that. I remember one story as well. Speaking of curses, there was these are all true stories, except, I mean, I just made up the car one, but there was one attorney who worked down in Arizona, and he was chosen to represent this woman who had gotten divorced from her husband, and I think there was a child involved. But anyway, the husband was very angry, who was getting divorced, and I guess he had taken the son because it was a joint or split custody thing, or joint custody, however you say that. And he had taken the son, and they went out into the middle of nowhere and met with this medicine man guy. And the child told the lawyer about this after he got back, so this is how he knew. They went and saw a medicine man. They went up onto a cliff, and they had two little dolls. One of them, I think they were both carved out of wood. And one was a darker skinned one, and one was a lighter skinned one, or lighter colored, not really physical skin, but. And I guess they were supposed to represent the lawyer and the wife. And the medicine man took them up there onto this mountain, and he dug a hole and buried them in the hole in the ground. And I guess this was like a ceremony that was supposed to bring death upon the attorney and the wife. And the boy told the attorney about this, and the attorney used that in court as well. But the legend is that whatever ceremony he did, it was supposed to kill the attorney and the wife. But if the victims found out about this curse, then it bounces back on the person who requested the curse. So, I mean, I don't know the follow-up for that story, but that kind of shows you, I mean, from what I understand from all of witchcraft, there's a give and take. It's you have to sacrifice something to get something. And the darker the deed, or the darker the curse, or whatever you want to do, the worse it is on you. I think you can perform a certain amount before you will get the repercussions. And that's why some people have a limit on how many curses they will do, per year, or maybe even per lifetime. I'm not sure. And the medicine men, who are the good guys and they will cure these kinds of things, they usually will cure the curse, but they won't tell you who put the curse on you, for fear of somebody putting a curse on them. And so it's just this whole huge petty game that's played, it seems like. But where does this magic come from? And how do they get it? Is it real? How did they discover it in the first place? Tons of questions that I don't really have the answers to, but I'm still researching this topic, and hopefully maybe I can do a follow-up episode and expand on that a little bit more. But whether you believe it or not is totally on you. At this point in my research, I do believe it, and I do believe there is definitely something going on there. It's just kind of like the Sasquatch thing. There are just too many people seeing too many things for it not to be real. There's something going on, and I'm trying to figure out what it is. So yeah, I guess that's about it. So thank you all for listening. I'm going to do another couple podcasts here pretty soon in the very near future. and we'll have a lot more content coming up on the jeffjarmanshow.com webpage. So thank you all for listening, and we will see you next time on the Grimm Times podcast. I'm working on a new software for recording podcasts. I'm going to start using more than one microphone so that if I have somebody on here like Skylar, we don't all have to just crowd around my one microphone. We can each have our own and we'll be comfortable, and hopefully it'll make for better conversation and better audio quality, audio leveling, that kind of stuff. Anyway, so today I'm going to talk about Skinwalkers. Our religion series is kind of on hold at the moment. We're still working on research and figuring out exactly what we want to go over for the next one. We still have 3 more parts of that series, I believe, to do. So today, with the Skinwalkers, I've been studying this for, just about 3 days here, most recently. But I've studied them in the past as well. It's just something that's really fascinating. For those of you who don't know, a Skinwalker is supposedly a Native American who can change into an animal or take on an animal-like quality. It's kind of like, almost think of a werewolf, basically, is what they are. And the story, originally, from what I've researched, All right, hello and welcome to the Grimm Times podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Jarman. It's good to be back. So I'm going to record this without actually editing the podcast whatsoever this time. I don't think I want to go through all that stuff just for me to talk to you this one time. I think today I'm going to do an episode on Skinwalkers. It's been a really long time since I've put out a podcast. I've got time set aside tomorrow to film. We are going to be filming Jeff Jarman Show tomorrow and Saturday. I'm going to have, hopefully, my Uncle Joe onto the Jeff Jarman Show for the very first time ever, so that would be his big debut. I've got a special character in mind for that as well. So, there's been a lot of things in the news right now. I'm not even sure how much I want to talk about, really. I've talked about it with people in person to the extent that I really want to go. The deal with Tony Stewart, obviously, is pretty heartbreaking for me, especially being a NASCAR fan and kind of empathizing with what he's going through, I guess. And then also with Robin Williams passing, just been a pretty sad time lately. But on the upside, we had our wedding last Saturday. I'm recording this on the 21st of August, 2014. So, and everything went really well. If you weren't there, sorry you missed it, but that's okay. I know other people have lives too. It did not rain on us, which was very nice. And everything went pretty well. I didn't mess up my lines because I had to read my own vows, so that was good. I didn't mess that up. That's about it. That's all I was really worried about. So now let's just jump straight into this. Oh, also, I forgot